Welcome to Keeping Athena Company. My name is Athena Kablenyu. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer and podcaster. Amongst other things, you know, we've got to do a bit of this, a bit of that in this day and age just to keep things afloat. And I started this podcast because I've got a little kid who's not so little anymore. And even though she can speak, her words still consist of things like biscuit, bubbles and things that don't really allow me to assess the democratic landscape of the planet that we're living in 2020. Anyway, so to help me have some adult conversations throughout the day, I started a podcast in which I invite my friends round for plantain and conversation. It's changed a bit this year because of lockdown and corona and the pandemic. I've had to do everything online. But this episode is fantastic and very special to me because in between the two lockdowns, I managed to get out to see a friend of mine to chat about his new project. His name is Paul Eccentric. His amazing wife/manager, wifeager. I don't know what your job title is, Donna, but you do an amazing job of it. She suggested that I come round to their haunted Victorian house in the countryside to talk about Paul's new project. It's a book in the genre of steampunk, which I know nothing about. So what more do I need to keep me satisfied? Herbal tea, conversation with a good, amazing creative whose work I love about their new project. And I got to know a lot. So enjoy the episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. So, you've written a book.
Yes.
It's set in Victorian times.
It is.
But it doesn't feature street urchins and chimney sweeps. What is it about?
This is about one man's trip to the moon. Loads of people have done that stuff. This is nothing new. A book that takes somebody from Victorian era up to the moon. What's different in this is, did he get there or not? It's the whole conspiracy theory thing. You've heard of the conspiracy of whether America went to the moon in 1969, you know. And the thing with that was, why would they bother? Why would they bother going to the moon? You had the Russians and you had the Americans fighting this great space race to put a man on the moon. And really, at that time, the only person who would have known if one of their rockets had got to the moon was the person who was in the rocket. Nobody else on the planet would really know for certain. So all you had to do was not be the first person to put a man on the moon, but the first person to say you'd put someone on the moon. Because as soon as you've said that and everybody's believed you, everybody else is going to think, well, why would we now bother to spend all that money to put the second person up there? Because they're only ever going to be the second person, even if they are actually really the first. And that was the idea I came at with this. You've got the books that say, man went to the moon in this wonderful rocket. He probably didn't, and we assume that he didn't. So in this, it's all about the conspiracy theory, the whole conspiracy theory. Did he get there? Did he not get there? And what happens to him afterwards?
The whole book sounds quite satirical.
It is satirical. It's I've read quite a bit of steampunk kind of stuff. Steampunk being stuff that's set in the past, but is still science fiction based, with things that you wouldn't expect to be there. You know, inventions that we would probably say hadn't been invented then. And it's the mixture of those two things of historical fact and historical figures even with fictional characters and futuristic things that shouldn't be there. I just like that idea of things like that.
Let's talk about when it's set, because you've been very specific in the years. I believe 1895?
1895.
Okay.
Specifically, it starts in 1895. It moves about a bit, but it does start in 1895. And the reason for that is the house that we're sitting in, my house, was built in 1895.
Really? You've done a good job keeping it up.
Thank you. It's still there. It's falling in a few places, but it's
see light switches.
It's still
glazing.
going. Yeah. And that was it. I was just interested. I'm going to be sitting in my house writing about something that I'm setting in the past. Where do I set it? I set it in the same year that the house came from, and then it feels right.
Yes.
As I move around the house, it feels like a Victorian house, and I was able to get into character by using the character of the house.
Okay, let's talk about your main characters. So I believe there's a lead. This is the person who may or may not have gone
There
to
are
the...
three leads, yes. There's one lead, which is a fellow called Gordon Periwinkle. The book, The Giant Step, is the first of a series of books. The overarching title is The Periwinkle Perspective, because everything is focused around this character of Gordon Periwinkle. He is this Victorian adventurer who goes off and discovers things that have been discovered before. And he's a bit of a bumbler. He's not that good at stuff. And when they're looking for somebody to send to the moon, they decide Yet send him because he's expendable. Doesn't matter if he gets killed on the way and stuff. He's really not that good. But they send him up there, and by sending him to the moon, he then becomes the most famous person on the planet who's never been on a stamp or a coin, just by virtue of having done that, which makes him a bigger character. And he's not that big a character himself, so he's trying to live up to that character and failing just a little bit. He's a man with a lot of flaws. And then you have the other two lead characters in this first book. One is Handel Blaze, who is a professor. She's the inventor royal for Queen Victoria, and she invents all sorts of stuff that we're told wasn't invented in those days. Things like rockets and stuff, and bionic arms and stuff that people need. So she's a big, very strong character. And then there is another character called Iggy Shikiwana, who is a female assassin. So there are two very strong female characters.
Best kind of assassin. If you want an assassin, you want a woman
she's
to do it.
tough. She's a right piece of work. But she's also, again, the very flawed character, because she doesn't want to be an assassin, and she wants to get out of the assassin game, and you can't get out of the assassin game. So she's got all that going on, and her involvement is that she is tasked with killing him off, because he's better off dead. You know, he knows too much. So she has to go try and kill him, and he's trying to deal with his problems, and she's dealing with her problems, and all the rest of the time the professor is making things that help them.
You've already told me that you're inspired by the home that you live in.
Yes.
What else inspired these characters and the world you created?
It's the sort of thing I like reading. I've written a lot in the past, but this is the first time I've written something like this. I've written music in the past, and I wrote the sort of music that I liked listening to. The same with poetry. I've written poetry that I like to hear. I'd never tried to write a story in the kind of things that I liked to read.
Right.
For some reason, I thought the sort of people who wrote the kind of stuff I liked to read were some kind of superheroes, and there was something extra going on that I could never do. And then I thought, you've got to try these things, and so I started to write this story. I used to run short story nights in cafes and pubs, where I'd invite people in to read their short stories, and I would always have to have 2 new stories every month that we did this as well, you know, and sometimes more if somebody didn't turn up. And so I got myself into a habit of writing short stories on a 2 or 3 a month basis. And then that all finished. It finished because various venues that we used to do this either closed or changed their ideas, and I found myself without a venue, but still with this mindset of must write these short stories. And I decided to write a short story that was in the vein I liked reading in. Absolutely loved it, and didn't have anywhere to perform it because the gigs had gone. And I thought, I haven't got to write another one next month. I could just keep going. So this actually started
like Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
All of his books were made up of short stories, right?
Yeah. Well, this started like that. The prologue to the book was the original short story, and then I just went further on with it because that just left the whole thing on a cliffhanger, and I kept going until I told the story I wanted to tell, and I thought, there's more. It's all in here. There's more. So if you're trying to publish a book, you finish your book first, and then you take it out and try and show it to various publishers. If you're trying to write a series of books, you need to have at least 2 sitting there so that you can say, this is what I've got, but this is where it goes afterwards. Otherwise, why would they publish you in case you can't come up with another one? So I'd written 2, and then we started trying to get it published, and it takes a long time.
It does
to punt stuff around the publishers. Anyway, eventually we get a bite from a publisher, but by this point I've written the best part of book 3. So I know exactly where this is going, and I thought, right, 3 will be the end, you know, I'll wrap it up. And then my brain said, no, there's more, make it bigger, bring more stuff in. So I've had a great time with this and built up this world and all these characters, and as the story progresses, more characters come in. And you start small, start with a small band of people that then grows as you get further out, so that I can build on these characters' lives and their their backgrounds.
It's a great book, and the satirical element really intrigues me, because we live in a world of fake news, Russian bots and Facebook and whatever, all these mad things. How much did the political climate we're in now inspire the events that take place in your novel?
It does quite a bit as it goes through. There is a prime minister that comes into it towards the end of the second book.
Does he have messy hair?
And he doesn't look like that particular prime minister, but he acts very much like him. And that there is a theme in there that I wouldn't give away without somebody reading it. But yes, it does inspire. The stuff around you inspires. The people around you inspires. When you're saying about the satirical element of it, when I decided that the book was going to be based around this whole idea of the conspiracy theory of, did the Americans really go to the moon in 1969? Or did they not? Did they just say they went? That whole thing, people will say, well, it's nonsense. We wouldn't have this and we wouldn't have that if they hadn't gone there. But in my mind, that's always intrigued me, and I loved that little idea of, what if they didn't? What if they just said they did? Who's going to prove them wrong? And I love that. Now, if you're going to set a book around that, and you're going to set it in a historical setting and bring in fantastical elements and hugely drawn characters, it's not going to be 100% serious, is it? So there has to be a satirical element of it. And I've been writing comedy for years, doing the anti-poet stuff, that to actually sit and write something serious goes against the grain.
Absolutely.
Now, I have done stuff, but yeah, it's difficult to sit and be serious, because you part of your brain is trying to find the humour in the situation. And I didn't want this to be an out-and-out laugh-a-minute book. I don't want somebody to label this as a comedy book, because it isn't a comedy book. Some of the situations are a little bit ridiculous, and some of the characters and some of the things they say are a bit ridiculous, but it's feeding into a story that stands up and makes sense. That was what I was aiming at.
You spoke a bit about writing a book that would be like the book kind of books you like to read.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell me a bit about novels that you like that maybe inspired this book or inspired your writing?
Yeah. Well, one of my favourite authors, and has been for years, is Christopher Fowler. Have you come across Christopher Fowler?
Please tell me about him.
Christopher Fowler writes, the majority of his books are written about London, and London is one of the characters in the books. He knows everything about London, all the tunnels underneath London, all the secret societies and things. And the book is not about those things that he writes. The books are about characters and the situations. But there's always an element of learning from his books, because as you read, you discover things about this great city that you didn't know. And I've loved that in his books, and it makes me then go and read up on something. It's just a slight mention he'll make of some secret society or some secret passageway, and then you go and you look and you find it's actually true.
Right.
And obviously he's added to it and he's made it bigger, but I absolutely loved that in his books, and I've read all of his books because that really does it for me. I also enjoy another writer, Colin Edmonds, who was published by the same publishing company as my book is about to be published by, Caffeine Nights. And Colin is a steampunk writer. Now Colin, he originally was a comedy writer. That was his career. He wrote for Bob Monkhouse and Paul Daniels and people back in the 60s and 70s. And he's got a font of knowledge about how to put comedy together and how to make a situation amusing but still serious. And he also knows all the magic tricks and things because he wrote for Paul Daniels. And the characters in his books is a stage magician. And so you're learning things again. You're picking stuff up that you probably didn't know. And I love that in a novel where you're finding things out that are true and real that you may not have known. And so you're reading something that is fiction, but it's also working as a non-fiction.
Yeah, and it brings adventure into your life.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that in that sort of situation. And so that's what I've tried to do. I don't think I'm emulating anybody else that I've read. I just like to do that. And the research is one of the most fun things about writing anything at all, whether you're writing comedy and you're trying to make something right. As you go looking to check your facts, you find something else you didn't know, and then you realise you just spent an hour reading about Mars or something, which is what I end up doing.
Okay, so we know when it's set.
Yes.
Where is your book set?
It's set in London, The majority of the first book in the series is set in London, but there are a few little forays out to Cardiff and the moon, obviously.
Well, it might be the moon.
It might be the moon, it might not. No. I know London because although I don't live in London, I've always lived near London, and London has always been a place I've gone in to work, to gig, performing. So I know it, and I've always felt like a Londoner who lives in the country around London, if you know what I mean. So I've set it in places I know, and I've then gone and researched those places so that I know them better.
I'd like to ask you about the conspiracy theory side of things. Now, I've read up on the moon landings and the conspiracy theory side of that, and I'm embarrassed to say it's quite convincing. You know, when you read it and you have it all in front of you, it doesn't feel like a stretch to say it was fake, even though I don't think it was. I don't think people who think it was are mad. I guess my question to you is basically, do you think they were faked? And also, are there any crazy conspiracy theories that you do believe in?
Well, that is one. I've read a lot and seen a lot of that, and tried to keep my mind open. Whenever you hear some conspiracy theory, you look into it just to have a look, see if you think it's real or not. And sometimes I come out thinking, I think that is true. And then sometimes I think it's not. The moon landing specifically, I've read a lot about that. And I just think at that time where you had the Russians and you had the Americans, and they were both locked in this space race to get the first person on the moon. Did they go or not? Because it would have cost an awful lot of money to get there. And whoever got there first is going to say they're there. Nobody else is going to go up to check, because what's the point of paying all that money to be second? So whoever gets there first has made that giant step. So I don't think they went.
My thing is that, think about America in that time and what they were doing. This is not like an innocent person. This isn't like accusing somebody who butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. You know, this is a country where there were civil rights issues in that country. They were deposing people out of office in other countries because they didn't like their politics. They were invading other countries. So, add fake moon landing to the list. That's probably
I think it's the sort of thing they'd do.
It's like the least harmful thing they actually probably did. However, I'm 50-50 on it, but that's good to know, because that means in the book.
No, we don't know for certain, do we?
You'd have to read the book.
You'd have to read the book to know.
Let's talk about it. So is it out already?
It comes out on the 26th of November.
Okay.
Should have been April this year, but of course a lot of things have happened this year. A lot of books got postponed. I was very disappointed because I was really eager for this to come out, and I had lots of things to go and do, literary fairs and things to go and talk to people about it, and it all got cancelled.
Okay, well, let's talk about it. What is happening? 26th of November, it will be released.
It will be released.
Bookstores and online, hopefully.
Yes.
What are you going to do? How are we going to celebrate?
Well, in the past when I've published books, we've always had a big do and invited people round and cake and stuff. But we can't do that anymore.
Right, it has to be virtual cake.
It's going to all have to be virtual, so it's all going to have to be done online in this kind of way, of me sitting here in front of a camera talking to people and trying to convince them to buy the book.
So your book is in the steampunk genre, a genre that's actually unfamiliar to me. So can you tell me and anyone who's watching who's unfamiliar with the genre what it means to you?
To me, it's taking a historical setting and adding things to it that weren't originally there, and just it's a fantasy thing. It's about building your own world. You see people at steampunk conventions and things. In all the fantastic costumes. To some people, it's all about the dressing up, and it's about the building your own costumes. To some people, it's building fantastic machines that look like they could have been built and used in a historical setting, but quite obviously aren't. Some people, it's about the art and creating fantastic pictures and models and sculptures, and other people, it's about stories. And for me, I love seeing all that stuff going on, but I'm all about the writing, and I perform. I've been a performer all my life, but I perform secondary. It's the writing, and so for me, it's just putting all those elements together and taking everything I want and sticking it in there, whether other people would think it goes in there or not. You know, you see people with these wonderful hats with all sorts of things stuck to them. Who's to say what's right or wrong and what can go on that and what can't? If you want to do that, then do it.
Right.
And it's making it work for you.
So
I think
it sounds to me like you've taken a genre that people love, and you've taken your passion for writing, and you've put them together, and you've created this novel, which you don't have to be interested in steampunk.
No, you don't. You really don't.
And it might get you interested in it.
It's like any book. Yeah. You might. I was talking about Christopher Fowler before. Now, Christopher Fowler, a lot of his books are detective books. I've not read anybody else's detective books. It's not the genre I like. I wouldn't watch detective films. It's not something that interests me. But because of the way that person writes and that person's vision, I'll read his stuff. And similarly with other books I will read, not just because I love all that sort of thing. It's how that person puts it together. And the thing with this book, it's not just for steampunk fans. It's for anybody who likes a story. You may like it, you might not.
So your book's coming out, remind me, 26th of November.
26th of November.
Are there other steampunk writers we can also get involved with and really like to read?
Have a look at Colin Edmonds, who I mentioned before. Colin, he's written a series, Smoke and Mirrors, about a Victorian magician. I loved that. I loved that series. There's another fellow, Toby Frost, that I've read, I think, 5 or 6 of his books, which is taking the whole thing in a slightly different vein, as if the Victorian Empire the British Empire under Victoria had carried on way past where it did. Another take on it. Again, who's to say which bit is right and which bit is wrong? Everybody adds their own bit. Those are 2 writers well worth having a look at.
So let's talk a bit about your previous writings, because this is your 6th book.
It is my 6th book, yeah.
This is your first venture, or your first foray into the steampunk world.
It is.
What kind of sandpits were you playing in before steampunk?
My first published book was a book called Down Among the Ordinaries. There's a poster for it up there on the wall.
Yeah.
That was, crikey, I think that was 2012 that was published. And it was a case of write what you know. And I knew about music because I'd been in bands for years and in the music industry. And so I wrote about a dried up, washed up musician who had been ripped off by his manager and by his solicitor and everybody around him. And it was a case of what happens when you've been very, very famous and then suddenly you're not.
Right.
And how do you adapt? How do you get back into the world and try to be an ordinary person where everywhere you go, everybody knows your face? Can you go and do a car boot sale and nobody recognise you? That was the idea of that. And he's a bit of an anti-hero because he wasn't a very nice person. And as you go through the book, you discover the reason that everybody hates him, and everybody should hate him because he was a git. And I enjoyed writing that.
Well, let's go back to talking about The Giant Step. I'm going to say there's an element of a personal story in that novel. Is there anything personal in The Giant Step that comes directly from your life experience or your opinions or
yeah, I think my opinions come through it all the way. I know if my father reads this, that's all he'll pick up. He'll pick up political opinion and things and say you're shoehorning your own anarchism in there. And yes, I probably am. I think whatever you do, you can build a character and you can try and keep that character distinct from the others. But I think my overall view of the world does kind of shape this world and all the characters within it.
And would you say that's something you generally do when you write your novels?
I think it's what I do when I do anything, to be fair. I'm an anarchist at heart, and I'm not like people think of an anarchist out there and smashing things up and destroying everything, because that isn't what an anarchist.
Actually, yeah.
It wasn't me. But I'm going to say I'm an anarchist at heart. I do believe in making it up as you go along, and respecting other people, and not doing things to other people that you wouldn't want done to yourself. That kind of anarchy, not following a rule that doesn't make any sense just because somebody wants to say it to you and appear big, that kind of thing. So that does inform everything I do. If you listen to the poetry and the songs, there is always this undercurrent there of sedition.
Well, talking of songs, your book has something that most books don't have, which is a theme tune.
Theme tune, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about why it's got a theme tune.
Why has it got a theme tune?
No, because that's a great thing, and how you came about with the idea, and what that conveys and how that complements the novel.
if you were doing a film or a television program or something, you would automatically, it would have a theme tune. You wouldn't generally do that with a book, but these days, with things being promoted on social media and that kind of thing, why shouldn't you have a theme tune for a book? It's got to have that same pizzazz as the film has. And so when I came to be doing this book, I thought, it needs to have a theme tune.
How can people listen to this theme tune? Is it going to be released on the same day?
Yeah. Well, actually, that will be out before.
Okay.
We've used it once already. Where are we now? We're recording this in September. The new video that's going to go with the same piece of music is all pictures of characters from the book.
Okay.
Say pictures of characters.
So it's a whole experience, isn't
yes.
it? Well, if you read the book and you see the video and you hear the song, you're getting the full 360-degree picture of what you're trying to convey.
That's it.
I think what you should do is play the theme tune before you read the book,
yes,
right? And then play it at the end when you finish a chapter.
Exactly.
Exactly, and then that'll get you more streams as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, keep doing that. It's a mixture. There's two songs that are put together. One is a very traditional Victorian pomp and ceremony thing. It's a with a marching band in the background, and then it goes into a far more punkier, rockier song about where the lyrics are about whether the 1960s moon mission was actually true or not, and then it goes back out into the bum 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 bum. It works.
It sounds really, really enjoyable.
I had a lot of fun doing that. A lot of fun.
It sounds like it, and that's just talking about music. You become instantly animated just talking about music. Because it's a big part of your life.
It has been for a lot of years. Yeah, I don't do that much singing anymore. As I was saying to you before, the writing is it for me. And if I've written something and I want to get out and sing it, I'll go and do it because I want to put across what I'm doing. In the same way as the book, if we could have gone out, I'd be out reading the book to people because I like to perform stuff I've done. But it's not, for me, it's not performance for performance sake, it's performance for the art's sake of getting the
like
stuff
you've done
out.
it, you want people to hear it,
yeah,
right?
And we all think that if we've written it, we can perform it better than anybody else can.
Well,
and I think you can to a degree.
Well, that's the case, and it belongs to you, so you should be the person to show it to the world. Let's talk about the anti-poet, which is half music, half poetry, I would say.
Poetry.
It's beat poetry. There's a name for it, Athena.
Yeah.
It's beat
well,
poetry.
it is, beat poetry is one of those things, how do you define it? Because you listen to something like a song like Peaches by the Stranglers.
Okay.
Now, if you listen to that, everybody thinks it's a song. It's a punk song from the 70s. It's beat poetry. Everything about that song is beat poetry. If you listen to anything that Ian Dury did, it beat poetry. They're not singing it. They're talking around the beat and around the rhythm. And that stuff, cadence, a lot of that stuff, you could... But then what do you say? They've got it registered as a song with the Performing Rights Society. It's a song, people know it as a song. It's got a tune to it. But I think that dividing line of what is a song and what is beat poetry, and then what is beat poetry and what is poetry, should we be defining those things and putting them into categories, or should we just say it's art?
Well,
listen to it, enjoy it.
Somewhat related to the topics we've been discussing, Whitey's on the Moon by Gil Scott Heron sounds like beat poetry now you mention it. Right?
A lot of things will. If you go back and listen to things that you've liked in the past and try and think now, is that a song, is it beat poetry? I think probably quite a lot of times you'd be thinking, that's actually beat poetry. And
again, I was going back to talking to you about the anti-poet, because primarily that's where I've seen you perform your art the most. Because you used to perform as the anti-poet at the shows you used to kindly let me tell my terrible jokes at.
You were great. The reason that we booked you again and again and again is because people asked you to come back because they thought you were funny. Your stuff was always great. That's why we liked you.
Well, your stuff is always great, and that's how I got into the anti-poet. And you travel around festivals and you perform. Have you been managing to do anything during this period of lockdown?
We had one gig. We were asked to do one gig, and initially I said no because I thought I don't really think we should be out at this time doing this stuff. And they said, "Oh, but it's all well distanced. The audience are going to be in little clusters around this cricket field." And yeah, they were. They were in little clusters of 4 or 5 people, but they were so far back from the stage. And what we're doing is comedy beat poetry, as you know. And being that far back and being grouped together in little huddles, they were distracted. And the tendency to sit and talk amongst yourself, if you were further forward and you could see the act and the act could intimidate you back, then that's different. But they were that far away, and there were stewards walking around with 2 metre long sticks, making sure that people didn't get too close and putting them between people.
Kind of kills the vibe, doesn't it? It's not very anarchist, is it?
No, and we're a double act. The Anti-Poet's a double act, and a lot of our show is me taking the rise out of him and the audience going on his side, and, you know, oh, poor little bass player, he's getting the mickey taken out of him all the time. And then as the show goes on, he turns around and gets one back over me, and everybody thinks, well, hey, that was spontaneous. No, it was rehearsed. But we couldn't really do that because he was way... No,
I never knew.
Once in a while we rehearsed. But he was way over the other side of the stage. I mean, how far did you have to be from me? And I was getting nothing back from the audience. Not to say they weren't going with it, because we had some nice comments afterwards, but they were so far away I couldn't read them.
And
as
the same
a
as
comedy
stand-up
act,
comedy.
you need to read them.
It's the same as, I mean, it's all comedy. It's exactly the same as stand-up comedy. Even before lockdown, if I did a comedy club at a gig where people were at tables all sat apart from each other, I would just be livid.
It's hard,
I would
isn't
be
it?
like, oh, I'm not going to enjoy this gig. And it is harder, and you have to work a bit harder, and you have to do other things to get their attention, and then you can do your material. And what you actually want is a proper canvas. You know, proper audience, all squashed together, nice low ceiling and all that stuff.
And we can't do that.
We can't do that anymore, but what we can do is access your art through your book, which is out on the 26th of November.
Do it that way. It's all in there.
Yes.
It's the same seditious, anarchist stuff in there. It's the same stuff that the Anti-Poet's doing, but this is the characters.
What connects your writing in this novel to the other things that you perhaps have done through the Anti-Poet or through the animations that you've written for?
What connects it? I think it's my voice.
Yeah.
I think it's as I was saying to you earlier, I've written other stuff, as you have. I wrote some poetry for a romance novel. A friend of mine, Carol Matthews, who writes romance novels, she had written this book, and one of the characters in it was a 15-year-old poet. And she said, I can't do poetry. Could you write the poetry for it? And I could, but it's got to come from that character. And normally I will write from my point of view. And suddenly I had to write from somebody else's point of view. And that was really difficult to do. I'm glad I did it because it stretched me. And I think we should always be trying to do things that stretch us. Because otherwise we do tend to think, right, we've got this book to write, we've got this play to write, we've got this song or this poem or this stand-up routine to write. And you go at it from the same angle. And I think sometimes it's nice to step out of that and do something in character. There are comedians out there on the circuit who just play characters, and all the comedy is around that character. And then you see them playing another character, and the comedy is completely different. I love that. That's really difficult to do, to have these two headspaces. And this material won't work with that character, but it will work with this one. And I find I'm doing that with everything I'm writing from my point of view. But the great thing with the novels is that I'm having to do it from the different perspectives of the different characters in there. And so I'm having to get into that headspace. I was writing a piece this week where I'm going from that character, and that comes up to a cliffhanger, and then it goes into that character's story, and that comes up to a cliffhanger, and then you go back to that character's bit, and that, you're building that tension as you go. And I found I couldn't get out of that character to get into that one. I'm going to have to jump a chunk here and write that whole sequence, and then go back and slot things in. And do the same with the other character, because I was too tied into that one.
It's like having multiple personalities, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And sometimes that works. Sometimes I think, I could really do with a break from that character because they really are getting on my wick now. I feel that I'm becoming that character on the inside, and I'm speaking like that character. I need to get out of that one into that one. And sometimes you just need to think, well, I've got to keep going in that one, otherwise I'm going to lose their speech pattern or something.
So, this is your first book in and around the steampunk genre. Yeah. What did you learn about steampunk writing for steampunk as opposed to consuming steampunk art?
I learned fairly early on to be bigger than I thought I'd need to be. That seems to be the thing with steampunk. It's all about nothing too small.
Go to the moon. Don't go Cardiff.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do it big. Yeah. And I did go back after I got about 2/3 of the way through the Giant Step and think, these could be even bigger. They could be even more exciting. And I went back and put more bits in. And as I've gone through the series from there, I've always got that in the back of my head. Could that be bigger? Could that be more exciting and more surprising. Don't write small. I think that's what it was. And I should have known that from reading other people's stuff. But you don't always take apart what you're doing when you're enjoying reading something. You don't always look at it and think, right, now how could that be done? How did they do that? You do that the second or third read through. The first time you're reading it for enjoyment, aren't you? And it's then when you start to take it apart and when you start to actually do it yourself that you think, yeah, this just needs to be more. Elements from here, elements from there can all come in. It's all a big mixing pot. In the same way that punk was in the 1970s. There's a very much a do-it-yourself feel to it, and anything goes.
Is steampunk rebellious?
I think it's very rebellious, yeah. It's not about going and buying a flash hat in a shop. It's about buying something and making it your own. So, it's rebellious in that sort of way. Anarchic, I think. I think that's the underlying feel. It's what I get from it anyway. What other people get is up to them, but I get that feeling of anarchy in it, and that excites me.
It sounds like something that's right up your street.
Yeah.
So finally, to end, tell us, title of the book, which I've said many times, but I'll let you say it. When it's coming out, how we can buy it, and how we can listen to the theme tune.
It's called The Giant Step. It's volume 1 of The Periwinkle Perspective by Caffeine Nights. Your best bet is to go to the Caffeine Nights website and look it up, and you can pre-order as I think of next week. And it comes out on the 26th of November in paperback. There is an ebook before that, and there will be an audiobook version after that. Go there, or you could look up The Antipoet. Antipoet.co.uk. You can look it up there, and you can buy it through us. And if you buy it that way, you get it signed. Whether you like it or not.
And the theme song?
The theme song. The theme song is going out on Facebook as of this week.
Excellent. So all we're going to do is find you on Facebook.
Look up The Antipoet. They know what they're doing. I don't touch the whole book was written on this. This is the most technical I get.
Is it powered by Steam?
It is powered by Steam. Sometimes it comes on when you press that button. Sometimes it doesn't.
That sounds as rebellious
that
as
is
you
rebellious,
can get. In 2020, still writing books on a Nokia.
Nokia 6500 special. I think so.
Paul, thank you so much for having me in your home
Athena.
and the peppermint tea.
Thank
it's been a pleasure. I can tell you it's Victorian. It's not haunted. So
it is haunted.
Is it haunted as well?
It is haunted, yes.
All right, we'll have to talk about that in the next interview. Thank you, Paul. Everyone, buy the book. See, I did something to camera. That was for Ian. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it.
That was the fabulous Paul Eccentric. He had me in his eccentric Victorian house. I didn't see any ghosts, but I'm confident it was haunted. It had a haunted kind of spirit about it, but a good haunting, like a Casper kind of haunting. Anyway, it was great for them to have me over. Really enjoyed my afternoon there. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. His book, if you would like to purchase it, it's called The Giant Step. It's on Caffeine Nights Publishing, and the link to buy it will be in the description of this podcast. You can also find Paul Eccentric on Facebook and online. I'll put all of his links in the description of this podcast as well. And to be honest, Paul Eccentric is a pretty easy person to find. Once you Google him, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's the guy I'm looking for. I've been Athena Klebenu. If you've enjoyed this podcast, do what you do with podcasts that you like. Comment, share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone about it. If you're on the bus, listen to it, tap someone on the shoulder. Actually, don't do that because of social distancing. Get yourself a podcast stick. It's like a stick. It's 2 meters long. And what happens is when you listen to a great podcast, you tap somebody in front of you with your stick and you say, hey guys, I've got a great podcast for you. You're right, that doesn't exist, but it needs to exist. It's a great idea. Write it down, Athena. That's a great idea. Look, I've been Athena Klebenu. You have been fantastic. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch up next time.